Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar about Davenport Green to Ardwick. My name's Jane, and I'm an engagement executive with HS2 Limited. We'd like to thank you for joining us today for this webinar. As you understand, we're unable to hold our large information events as we would normally do due to COVID-19. And we hope this webinar will keep you informed about the design refinement consultation, updates for your area, and give you an opportunity to ask general questions which you may have. During the webinar, you will hear from our engagement manager for the area before we move into a question and answer session, where we will be joined by a team of specialists who will be able to answer as many questions as time permits. Please note, we'll only be able to answer general questions. For any questions relating to your individual circumstances that you do want to have answered, we ask that you've not logged in anonymously and that you provide us your email so we may come back to you outside of this event. These questions will not be published as part of this webinar. You can also contact our help desk. The details will be at the end of this webinar for further information. If we get lots of questions about the same topic, we may group these together so we can answer them as one to avoid repeating the same things. And if we do run out of time and your question has not been answered, we ask that you contact our help desk and we'll come back to you outside of this webinar. Before I hand over to my colleague, Carol, I wanted to share some technical information with you. We're not expecting any technical issues this morning on this event. However, I wanted to provide some advice should you experience any connection problems. If your feed freezes, please wait for around 10 seconds and it will probably unfreeze and correct itself. If this doesn't happen, use the leave button to exit the call and rejoin using the event link again. You can use the toggle at the bottom of the screen to rewind back to where you left the event and catch up from where you were. You can also use this function at any point during the call should you need to pause for any reason. If there is a freeze or a disconnect and you're unable to rejoin due to a wider Microsoft incident, we will email you with further information. There is a question and answer function which you should be able to find at the top right hand of your screen. My colleague Helen will be here keeping an eye on questions that come through, and at the end of today's session, she will ask the team to go through as many as we can as time allows. If you've previously attended one of our local information events, our next speaker should be familiar to you, who's going to talk through the purpose of today's session. So Carol, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon. I'm Carol, an engagement manager with HS2, and this webinar is part of a series providing a summary of our most up-to-date plans for HS2 along the western part of the route between Crewe and Manchester and connecting to the West Coast main line south of Wigan and beyond. There's lots of information to take in during this time, so a recording of this presentation will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. This webinar will cover the community area MA07, Davenport Green to Ardwick, which is approximately 13 kilometres, most of which is in the proposed Manchester Tunnel. It will cover a proposed refinement to the design in your area that we are consulting on and inclusion of changes from a design refinement consultation in 2019. Also, smaller changes we've made to our proposals and what to expect from us in the future. All of this new information can be found on the HS2 website, or you can contact our 24-hour help desk. Details for both will be provided at the end of this presentation. So first, I will summarise the design refinements that have now been confirmed for inclusion by the Secretary of State following the consultation in 2019. A summary of the feedback received in response to the consultation and the reasons for the Secretary of State's decisions have been published and can be found by visiting our website. As a result of the 2019 consultation, the Secretary of State has confirmed the relocation of Palantine Road vent shaft to an alternative site within Withington Golf course. This is to reduce the impact on the flood storage capacity in the area. Also confirmed is the relocation of a vent shaft from the playing fields of Manchester Enterprise Central Academy on Lytham Road to the car park of Fallowfields Retail Park on Birchfields Road. We've made some changes to these proposals to address concerns that were raised during the consultation period. The Minister of State for Transport has published the Design Refinement Consultation response document. This details the government's decision on the HS2 Phase 2B design refinements to the western leg. In addition, then, there's also an independent analysis of the responses to the consultation. This was undertaken by Ipsos Mori and is available for review. During the consultation on the Working Draft Environment Statement in 2018, feedback from stakeholders informed us that the location proposed was taking capacity from Didsbury Flood Storage Basin. This is a key element of managing floodwaters from the River Mersey. In addition, some feedback indicated that the location of the Palantine Road vent shaft was too close to Ashfield Lodge, a residential building in the area. As a result, and as part of last year's design refinement consultation, we proposed moving the vent shaft nearer to the golf club car park, and we identified additional land required to provide replacement flood storage capacity. In addition, we included planting around Ashfield Lodge in our designs to help screen the vent shaft further from this residential building. Loss of woodland was another concern raised during last year's consultation, specifically a site close to Withington Golf Club car park. This area will be needed as part of the construction compound, but we have now included additional measures to try and reduce the impacts on this site. These measures include new woodland planting around the vent shaft site, enhancing the existing woodland at Wrengate Wood, and the creation of a wildlife corridor from the vent shaft past Wrengate Wood through to the surrounding area. This helps connection back to the Mersey and the wider River Mersey wildlife corridor. With regards to the consultation on the relocation of the vent shaft from Lytham Road to Birchfields Road, we received a large number of responses detailing alternative options for the vent shaft. These were reviewed, and details of these can be found in the Minister of State's consultation response document. And whilst the Minister of State has decided to incorporate the proposed relocation, the government recognises that relocating the vent shaft, head house and auto transformer station from the playing fields of MEA Central School on Lytham Road to Fallowfields Retail Park will involve demolition of retail units and impacts on the car park at the retail park. For this reason, the Minister of State expects HS2 Limited to carry out work and to understand the level of use of the park and stride facility and whether alternative arrangements need to be put in place. We also know that as a community, a lot of concern was expressed about the head house for the vent shafts. Final design for the head houses are quite a way off. I'd like to reassure you that we will continue to work closely with the community as we develop these. The slide currently on screen shows a head house for HS2 in London. This is the South Kilburn area and is part of the 4.5 mile tunnel that runs from Euston to Old Oak Common. So it's a very similar makeup to urban makeup to Manchester. This design has been taken to the local community to seek feedback. This feedback will then be considered at the next stage of design before we return to the community with a You Said We Did event, before we publish final design for the head house, where we would have incorporated input from the local community where possible. This is the approach we will take forward when designing and building the scheme through your area. We're also consulting on some further changes in your area around Ardwick. This is part of the proposed refinements to the design around Manchester Piccadilly High Speed station, and we're consulting on this as part of our Western Leg design refinement consultation. This consultation will run until the 11th of December, and I would like to encourage you to let us know what you think about these proposed changes. In our current design, the location of the North Tunnel portal would have had major impacts on the Ardwick train care facility. We needed to review this design as the facility is essential for stabling Trans-Pennines trains operating into and out of Manchester Piccadilly and is therefore a key part of the Northern Transport network. The proposal is to move the location of the portal to the west side of Withington Road, as shown on the plan above, in the area of land that is currently occupied by a metal recycling company, but beyond the Ardwick facility. Moving the portal west means that the Ardwick train facility will no longer have to be moved to make way for the portal. This image shows a visualization of the Ardwick depot facing south from the A635 Old Ashton Road. So this is one of 5 changes being made to the design around Manchester Piccadilly, the rest of which are in community area MA08. In summary, these other proposed changes are 2 additional platforms for a total of 6 at the station. This is to accommodate future Northern Powerhouse rail services. This change would be delivered by changing the configuration of platforms, minimising the additional width required for them. The second change is relocation of the Piccadilly Metrolink station under the new high speed station and includes provision for a new Piccadilly Central Metrolink station. The third change is inclusion of passive provision for a future Manchester to Leeds junction. This would facilitate future Northern Powerhouse rail services between the 2 cities. And part of this change does also come into MA07 community area. The fourth change, changes to the road network around the station to minimise disruption to road users and to reconnect those highways severed by construction. There is a webinar which will cover this off in much more detail on the 18th of November. Don't worry if you can't attend that, we will be recording it and putting it on our website. Other new information in our plans includes where we will need to do work on local utilities such as gas, water, electricity and telecoms. This is to protect and provide supply during HS2 construction. Because the majority of this part of the route is in tunnel, there are not many significant diversions in the area. This example shown, this particular slide relates to a temporary sewer connection required to the nearby HS2 compound where the tunnel boring machine will be launched from. So presently we're in discussions with the asset owner United Utilities to explore a possible alternative sewer connection point so as we can mitigate any impacts to the schools as far as reasonably practicable. Our plans also show the construction traffic routes we will be using to move material around in order to build embankments and cuttings. We understand that construction traffic is a major concern for people and building the railway will require moving very large amounts of material. Haul roads and temporary routes within the construction boundary to move material from one location to another and to help us keep our vehicles off the existing road network will be used as much as practically possible. We've also recently started a round of ground investigation or GI work around the Cheshire area. This is to help us better understand the challenging ground conditions in this area. This work will be widened to other locations and will include city and urban areas along the route in the future. GI is the examination and study of soil, rocks and groundwater below the surface. This information helps us to understand the ground conditions along the route and to ensure the new railway is constructed safely and efficiently. Further GI work will be carried out across the route later in our programme. The GI works will include non-intrusive investigation using radar, which helps us build up a picture of what is underground, and also intrusive investigations such as drilling and taking samples for testing. Finally, the plan shared with you today will be part of our submission of the Phase 2B hybrid bill to Parliament, which is in early 2022 or sooner if possible. This is how the government gains permission to build this nationally important infrastructure. 2024 is when we expect royal assent to be granted, and then early enabling work such as utility diversions and compound setups may start soon after, but the main work civils will commence in 2026. Finally, Phase 2B will be operational between 2035 and 2040. This will be subject to further work on the study, design and delivery options and outcomes that come from the Integrated Rail Plan and the National Infrastructure Commission. So I'll just hand you over to Helen.
Thanks very much, Carol. We'll now move on to some questions. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our panel. Today we have joining us from HS2 Limited, Alexandra from Environment, David from Engineering, Robert from Sound, Noise and Vibration Construction, Harry from Sound, Noise and Vibration Operation, Andy from Tunnelling, Linda, our Stations and Tunnels Project Manager, Frank from Construction and Logistics, and from the Department for Transport we have Tom from the Policy Team, Jenny from Northern Powerhouse Rail Team, and Jonathan joining us from Transport for the North. As Jay mentioned earlier, we'll answer as many general questions as possible given the time that we have. So our first question is one for Frank. Construction traffic for all 4 ventilation shafts through the area lie primarily located along main roads. Does it affect and become a traffic hazard for the varied traffic levels along these roads?
Thank you, Helen. Yes, the traffic routes will be along the main arterial roads leading from the shaft locations. A full traffic and transport assessment has been done and will be further developed as the designs develop further in more detail. The impacts generally, as I say, use the main roads, so it shouldn't impact the safety, and the times of use of the road is controlled by the Code of Construction Practice, which limits the times when traffic and heavy vehicles can use the roads.
Thank you for that, Frank. The next question is one for Alexandra. On Palantine Road, can mature trees along Palantine Road and at the perimeter of the existing woodland be retained around the works depots? The new wildlife corridor needs to be planted well before any felling commences. Can we receive reassurances that this will be done?
Sorry, Alexandra, you're on mute.
Apologies all, thank you very much. So I'll just saying thank you for that, Helen. And in terms of the planting around Palantine Road vent shaft, as Carol explained earlier, we have listened to the feedback and we've looked at our models and our assessments closely with our ecologist team to understand what the impacts are and what replacement we need to provide. So we have identified that there is an area of woodland planting next to Withington Golf Club, which we can link together. So currently it's existing 2 individual pieces of woodland, and by coming in and be able to plant along between the 2, you're then connecting those 2 woodlands up. So that is part of our plan. If you have a look on the CT06, which is the operational map which we provided as part of the DRC or the design refinement consultation update, you'll see that we have provided planting. It does look like we're planting over existing woodlands, but that won't be the case. We'll only be planting between the 2 existing woodlands where we aren't impacting by removing any of that woodland.
Thank you, Alex. The next question is one for David. Regarding the vent shaft proposed for Fallowfield Retail Park, what consideration has been given to relocating it south of Moseley Road in the area currently occupied by other retail units, including Quick Fit? And if that location has been rejected, what are the reasons?
Yes, that's quite a good question. So our design refinement consultation, when we concluded that, we undertook an assessment on approximately 18 other sites that were considered in that assessment, ones that were brought up by the consultation responses. We undertook a technical appraisal of that, and that looked at things such as the track alignment, safety, and intervention points, line speed, traction power, all of these things that we need to make a compliant option. And then what followed then was a construction compound sort of sizing activity. So out of all of them, we actually couldn't find very many technically feasible ones. Out of that, some were progressed into a second stage, but they were found to be a worsening on the baseline position. There is more information in the design refinement consultation outcomes response as well, if people are looking for more information on it.
Thank you for that, David. Our next question is for Carol. Can you confirm if the air vent on Wilmslow Road will be in the area of the Christie Hospital current car park? If so, please can you confirm if you're in discussions with the Christie about this as to where to move their car park?
Hi, thanks, Helen. Yes, so I can confirm the vent shaft is proposed for the Christie surface car park on Wilmslow Road. It's actually referred to as Car Park D. And we are working very closely with the Christie NHS Trust to mitigate the potential impacts of the loss of any car parking spaces, and whether there's we're presently looking at what other alternatives there are. Our land and property team are working very closely with them as we recognise the car park and the services that the Christie Hospital provide within Manchester are very important. So work has been ongoing for some time and will continue until we can come up with the appropriate solution.
Thanks, Carol. Question now for David. Approximately how deep is the tunnel intended to be?
So the tunnel is 12.8 kilometres long. So as you can anticipate, not every depth will be consistent. So we at this stage go up to 45 metres deep. That is the bottom of the tunnel, and when you take the top of the tunnel, that's then 36 metres. So we start diving down into the tunnel to reach about 30 metres by the first vent shaft on the south and then on the north. And from those portals at the north and south, we're about 15 metres, and we are sort of dropping in levels quite quickly. So we will be quite deep, sort of within the actual sort of the main route of it, and it will only really be the first starting and ending sort of portals, but you will see sort of some slightly reduced depths.
Thanks, David. I've got another one for you. Was the original Ardwick tunnel located directly in front of the long-site TMD demolishing the Olympic Freight Terminal?
No. A quick answer to that. The original tunnel was situated to the north of Ardwick depot, which is the Siemens depot where the Transpennine trains are maintained, whereas the long site's a slightly different one, but again, similar area.
Thank you, David. Alex, a question for you around ecology survey work. What ecology survey work has been carried out so far?
Okay, yep, thank you. So in terms of our survey work, we've been accessing the land required to construct HS2 plus a good sized buffer in line with best practice. So this has been agreed with Natural England, and we've been undertaking surveys on site now for a few years, and we will continue to take surveys up until hybrid bill submission, but also post hybrid bill submission when we come to royal assent to inform our detailed location environmental mitigation.
Thank you, Alex. David, is the position of the Wilmslow Road M20 vent shaft unchanged, i.e. is it still adjacent to the Ferndean Road?
So the Wilmslow vent shaft is still in its working draft position and is still located on what's currently a car park sort of area of land. So that hasn't changed since we last came out to speak to you. Hope that answers the question.
Sorry, apologies, that was my fault. I was trying to unmute and it wouldn't let me. Thank you for that one, David. I've got another one for you around the estimated track length for acceleration and deceleration from airport to Ardwick. Is the tunnel GIC gauge?
I appreciate that's a very technical question.
It might be helpful if you explain what GIC means for everybody. Thank you.
So I'll take the second part of that question first. So the gauge that we are designing to is effectively the train, so the size of a train. So in the UK, we generally have smaller trains, as we have we had the first trains in the world, and we are hampered by some of our older structures. Whereas on the continent, there are slightly bigger trains which conform to an international standard. They are slightly bigger on the top as well. Our high-speed 2 line will conform to that set of requirements as well. So our tunnel will be a GIC-ish sort of gauge. So we will have enough space to fit the continental trains in. In regards to acceleration, deceleration, we have the 12.8 kilometre tunnel, and out of the Manchester Airport sort of northern throat, I'll call it, which is where all the sort of trains manage to cross over. Yes, there will be a period of acceleration and deceleration in there, and that will be taken up within the station sort of approaches and the tunnel itself, and the same will go for the Manchester Piccadilly end on the north side as well. But I can't give you lengths, as that's sort of very sort of detailed sort of calculations that have been undertaken by some of our contractors.
Thank you. The next question is one for Jenny. Are we terminating at Manchester, or can the HS2 and MPR continue on the same track to Leeds and Cumbria?
Thanks. The current plan is that HS2 services will terminate at Manchester Piccadilly. But as is set out in the consultation document, the Northern Powerhouse rail routes themselves will be subject to a separate planning assessment and consenting process. If the government does choose to proceed with these routes, they'll be subject to outcomes from the integrated rail plan, which is due to publish at the end of the year. And that this would be also subject to further environmental assessment and consultation.
Thank you. A question now for Frank. Could construction traffic access to the Palantine Road vent shaft be provided by a temporary ramp from left in and left out junction on the M60 motorway so as to minimise use of the narrow section of Palantine Road by this traffic?
Thank you, Helen. Generally speaking, Highways England do not like additional connections to the motorway. So it's something that had to be done in consultation with Highways England. As I say, it's generally speaking very unlikely that you get that sort of arrangement, and it would have to be for something fairly significant. Now, where this is obviously significant construction. Our traffic assessments have demonstrated that the existing road network can handle the traffic from the shaft construction. So at the moment, we're not considering that.
Thank you, Frank. The next question is one for Andy. When tunnelling starts, how will the Didsbury area be affected, i.e. particularly underground noise and subsidence of properties?
So the Didsbury area being the reception shaft for the TBMs. So obviously initially it's just the construction of the shaft, and then extraction of the TBMs when they arrive towards the end of the tunnelling. On the settlement side, obviously settlement is fairly minimal for the types of TBMs we've proposed. They're the most advanced TBMs you'll see in the world, and in order to guarantee that minimum settlement and minimal effects, there'll be eventually a provision of a settlement deed that anyone that's entitled to can apply for, where we'll assure with them that the settlements are minimised and mitigated as much as possible. And the damage, any damage that could mitigate from that would be reduced and talked through that settlement deed process.
Thank you for that. David, a question for you. Is the long-site TMD or the disused Eurostar regional depot situated opposite not sufficient for HS2 instead of the Crewe North depot?
Okay, again, another really good question. It's probably worth just harking back to phase 1, High Speed 2 phase 1 temporarily. High Speed 2 phase 1 are also running trains up to Manchester essentially via Handsacre, which is a West Coast Main Line connection, and will also continue running up towards Scotland as well. Under phase 1, there are trains being stabled at Longsite and under the 2A scenario as well. In phase 2B, we have a direct connection for HS2 all the way up into Manchester, but there is no connection between HS2 and Network Rail at the Manchester Piccadilly area. The result means we cannot get our trains into that area, and we need a dedicated facility for that as well, just based on the quantity of trains that we need to store. And that is the reason why Crewe North rolling stock depot is also required. So it's a sort of combination of the quantity of trains that we need to store in the area, and that it's not operationally feasible for us to get into Longsite anymore.
Thank you for that. We've had a question asking what a TBM is, and I won't throw that one out. I can answer that one myself. That is a tunnel boring machine. Apologies for the use of acronyms there. Yes, it's a tunnel boring machine, and they will be used to create the tunnels going under Manchester. Tom, this is a question from you. In this circumstance, that HS2 becomes an underground station, is there provision for passengers for natural lighting between the tunnel and Piccadilly station? That was a question to Tom. My apologies if I didn't say that at the beginning. That's a question to Tom. And I shall start again. So in the circumstance that HS2 becomes an underground station at Manchester Piccadilly station, is there provision for passengers for natural lighting between the tunnel and Piccadilly station? Okay, well, we'll come back to that one, I think. I don't know if we're having some problems there. Harry, is either a question for Harry or for Rob around operational noise. What will the noise level be of the stations at nearby houses?
Yeah, that one's for me. So it will completely depend on distance from the line, the height of the line, if there's any sort of screening elements in between the train and properties, and any mitigation such as noise fence barriers. The environmental statement, which is currently being worked on, provides predictions at all noise sensitive properties along the route, and where those noise levels are assessed to be significant, then mitigation is considered, noise fence barriers, earthworks, and in individual cases very close to the line, possibly noise insulation provision. But it's a hard question to answer without some of those parameters in terms of distance from the line and that sort of thing. I hope that's helpful.
It is, thank you. A question for David. Will any additional vent shafts be required in the underground sections to facilitate an emergency crossover?
So we haven't got any switches and crossings underground, crossovers, if you will, any points to allow the trains to cross between tracks. We have undertaken those sort of possible movements above ground, so in the Manchester Piccadilly and Airport area. There will be cross passages between the tunnels to note, and that will just enable people to cross over between, such as maintenance staff, as in if needed. But we have no vent shafts or crossovers underground.
Thank you, David. A question, I believe, now for Rob. While noting ground structures, etc., will impact, generally, how deep does the tunnel need to be in order to prevent noise and vibrations from construction and operation? This might be one for both Rob and Harry.
Hi there. Yeah. So as the rotating head of the tunnel boring machine cuts through the ground, the tunnel boring machine could give rise to ground noise and vibration that is perceptible, although it would only be for short periods of time. So that's generally a matter of days as the tunnel boring machine approaches and passes the nearest receptors. But modern tunnel boring machines that control vibration and ground-borne noise generation at source will be used for the construction of the proposed scheme. In line with the draft Code of Construction Practice, any residual temporary ground noise or vibration effects will be mitigated by community engagement, including advance notification to residents. So taking this into account, this mitigation and the short duration of potential ground-borne noise or vibration effects, significant effects on residential receptors as a result of tunnelling are considered unlikely.
I can come in there and answer the bit on operational trains. So in order to sort of travel at such high speeds without sort of shaking apart, the trains naturally have very smooth wheels and tracks, which are very highly maintained. So they're not really anything like kind of rumbly old freight trains. In addition, through the whole of the Manchester Tunnel, there'll be vibration mitigation incorporated into the track. So this is in the form of a kind of squidgy material that goes under the track supports and reduces the vibration passing into the ground. So that controls the ground-borne noise and vibration. A full model and impact assessment of the ground-borne noise and vibration has been carried out as part of the environmental statement, which is published next year. The current conclusions of that modelling are consistent with the working draft, which are there's no vibration or ground-borne noise impacts in Manchester, and those levels are the predicted levels are actually well below those that would be considered disturbing during the day or night.
Thank you for that. We now have Tom back, experienced some technical difficulties, so apologies about that. This is the question around Manchester Piccadilly Underground Station and if any design provides natural lighting between the tunnel and Piccadilly Station.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Some technical difficulties. Yes, so the current design is actually for a surface station. So there aren't actually designs in place for the underground station to assess that question. Obviously, there have been different stakeholders that have put in views on this to the IRP, and that will make the decision in the final analysis between underground and surface station, in which case we would have to look at the different designs and assess the issue.
Thank you, Tom. A question now, I think for Frank. What provision for construction traffic, or provision is there for construction traffic that does not impede health problems for nearby soccer league pitch? I presume there are some sports pitches close to vent shaft 4 by Birchfields Road, so I'm assuming it's responding to that.
Right, okay. I mean, I think it applies to any of the traffic, not exclusively a soccer pitch, that the latest sort of vehicle engines and so on, and obviously as time is moving on, we're all quite aware of changes in technology and the sort of vehicles that are on the road, and particularly obviously their emissions. Lorries generally now are obviously diesel, and particulate emissions is a big issue. Engines are increasingly getting better and better in terms of their emissions. So I think as a general principle, the latest technology would be used for the benefit of the general public, as well as any adjacent sports facilities.
Thanks for that. A question for Andy. What soundproofing or vibration reduction is in place to reduce the sonic boom from tunnels, i.e. 3D noise cancelling?
Okay. Okay, so the main element we provide within the tunnels, or to the entrance to the tunnels, is what we call a porous portal. The pressure, micro pressure waves, which are created through the tunnel, entering the tunnel and exiting the other end, which creates that sonic boom, would be reduced by providing these porous portals. And essentially all this is providing small holes, incremental lengths along the exit structure and entrance structure, so that allows the pressure to dissipate equally to reduce any noise. Bearing in mind that as we're coming into Manchester, the train is slowing anyway, so there is a reduced element there of in some projects not requiring one, but here we are providing one to do that exact thing. And yeah.
Thank you, Andy. We are down to our last couple of questions, so if anybody does have any more, please do send those in. A question now for David. Is there passive provision for more high-speed tracks, including track interface for high-speed trains along the tunnel?
Okay, so our remit as it stands is for only a 2-track railway through this section, and we have not had any notification to say, but it would be, for example, more, say to 4 tunnels. So we have been developing 2 at this time, so we wouldn't be making any passive provision for that. In regards to the higher speed sort of element of this, we are already designing to 230 kph in the area. Our track geometry, so i.e. the bend in the track as it sort of goes around a corner, is limited as well to 230, so we won't be making provision for high speed at this time. Not only this, the distance between Manchester Airport Station and Manchester Piccadilly Station isn't that far, and we don't think that a high speed would be beneficial. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you. Okay, we have come to our last question, and it's one for Alex. What mitigation is being carried out regarding Davenport Green Ancient Woodland, which is on the Natural England Inventory of Ancient Woodland? There isn't any ecological buffer retained around it by works, and a large section will be destroyed.
Okay, thank you for that question. That's a very important question. So in terms of this area, it's been a focal point for the teams. So as you've pointed out, there is an ancient woodland site, which is very close to the airport station, and something we've been working very closely with Natural England on. So what we've been doing over the last design phases is trying to identify how we can pull the construction boundary, which is the area of land that we would require to safely build HS2, and then ultimately the operational side as well, trying to pull that back as far as possible at Davenport Greenwood site through uses of, for example, retaining wall. So the retaining wall allows us to pull that station pinch point back, trying to provide less impact on that ancient woodland. In terms of mitigation, HS2 realised that ancient woodland is not something that you can mitigate, it's not something you can replace. But in terms of compensation, we do have ecologists who run the assessments, understand what the impacts are, understand how much habitat needs to be replaced. So you'll see for the MAO6 area that falls into, that on the operational, so the CTO6 drawings that have gone live with the design refinement consultation update, that you'll see there is a large area of woodland habitat planting which has been provided due to the loss of that woodland at Davenport Greenwood.
Thank you for that, Alex. We've actually just had a last minute question in, which will be going to David. What is the maximum capacity of the tunnel in terms of trains per hour?
So the tunnel has been designed for HS2 trains, as we've sort of said before. The headway analysis over distance, so the time between trains effectively, has also been undertaken for HS2 as well. In regards to a max capacity, that would be subject to a load of sort of route analysis of where these trains then go and where they are then tied into constraints, such as, for example, if Manchester Piccadilly is a constraint, can you get more trains out? So for the HS2 trains, we have 5 in a single direction, of which 3 are from London and 1 stops at Birmingham Interchange before making its way up to Manchester, and then there are 2 trains from Birmingham to Manchester as well, and they all stop at Manchester Airport and Piccadilly. It should be noted that we are also working with Northern Powerhouse Rail on sort of what train services they might want to run at a later stage. And yeah, that's about as much as we can answer on that comment without sort of doing further analysis on maximum capacities and sort of headway analysis.
Thank you, David. And to put you somewhat on the spot, we've had one final question. This will be the final question now that's come in, asking around the size of the shaft on Birchfields Road. Would you be able to give an approximate sort of figure around how big that vent shaft will be?
Yes, so the vent shaft itself, which is obviously the hole going vertically into the ground, is around 24 metres so in the internal diameter. But there is also then 2 head houses on top, which are the sort of the fan rooms and sort of power supplies and whatnot. Those will be sort of about 30 metres, sort of square box, and then there'll be a water transformer station nearby as well.
Thank you, David. That was our last question, so I'll now hand back over to Jane.
Thanks everyone for your questions, and I hope you found today's webinar useful. All of the information we've spoken about today can be found on the HS2 website. The details are here on the screen now, and also the details for our help desk number, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So please, if you have any more questions, feel free to contact our help desk. So that's the end of our webinar now. Thank you again for joining us, and have a nice day. Thank you.